part of our Smithsonian Associates Art of Living series, our guest today on the Not Old Better Show is composer, performer, podcaster, radio show host, and music expert Rob Kapilow. Rob is well known for so many things, but his What Makes It Great series on NPR is perhaps the go-to resource on music. In addition to What Makes It Great, Rob does family music for kids. And Rob is well known for his Hollywood work with Polar Express and Green Eggs and Hamadeus, along with the score companion Dr. Suess Gertrude McFuzz. Kapilow's Citypieces with communities and places in history, including his work with the Blackfeet tribe titled Summer Sun, Winter Moon, are stunning. Just a lot of brilliant work. Rob, along with a group accompanying him, will share music from Harold Arlen, who wrote over 500 songs, many well-known, but Arlen himself isn't so well-known. None other than George Gershwin called Arlen the most original of all of us. Arlen won an Oscar, and he had many hits, and yet he's largely unfamiliar to many of us. Rob will change all of that when he deconstructs all of Arlen's music. Any fan of the Great American Songbook could hum a few bars of Arlen's music, including Over the Rainbow, Stormy Weather, or That Old Black Magic, without having to think too hard. And yet, the composer of those songs remains little known. His songs are so alive that many singers, including Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, and even George Harrison, here singing Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, have recorded Arlen's wonderful music.
You got me in between the devil and the deep blue sea.
It is only...
Well, again, all that changes Sunday night, October 30th, when Rob Kapilow will be presenting What Makes It Great, featuring the music of Harold Arlen. I think I counted 21 seasons of What Makes It Great on NPR. And you'll see Rob here in Washington, D.C. at the Baird Auditorium, and the program begins at 6 sharp. I'll be there. Those who know Rob know of his work and know of his 21-plus seasons of What Makes It Great on NPR agree that Rob is a born teacher, a motivational speaker, and game show host, all rolled into one. And that's according to the Boston Globe. Well, audiences agree. Join Rob and guests on October 30th, 2016 for Smithsonian Associates series co-presented by the Washington Performing Arts. And join me today via Skype in welcoming Rob Kapilow. Well, welcome, Rob Kapilow. What just an absolute pleasure it is to be speaking to you.
Happy to be talking to you as well.
Great. And Rob, you are so well known for so many things, but I think we're going to spend some time talking about what makes it great. And literally, this has been something you've been doing. I think I counted 21 seasons. Is that about right?
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. So tell us, what is it that makes it so great about what makes it great?
You know, What Makes It Great was actually begun not in music at all. It originally started when I was in college, and I had a girlfriend who was interested in art history, and I didn't really know anything about art history. In a way, I really felt about art the way most people or many people feel about music. I knew what I liked, I knew what I didn't like, but I really didn't know why, and I didn't know much more about it. But as I say, since I had this girlfriend who was a painter, I decided to take an art history class at Yale. And the lectures were interesting and they were fine. But every week we would go to the Yale Art Gallery and the teacher would talk for an hour about one painting. And it was an absolutely eye-opening experience. I mean, I had never really learned how to actually look at a painting. And for 1 hour, it was like a masterclass in what makes it great, but on visuals. And then later, I sort of realized that the same thing was true in music. People know what they like, they know what they don't like, but all the fantastic things that as musicians we wish the audience could get, we never get a chance to get across. I mean, you can't really stop in the normal of the middle of a performance and say, wait a minute, listen to this fantastic viola line, or isn't this a spectacular chord? And so I decided to try to create what makes it great, to have people hear all the fantastic things about music that we love, but that we feel that sometimes race by because music goes by so fast in real time.
Yeah. Well, that whole girl thing can just be a problem. I married a ballet choreographer. And I had no knowledge about ballet prior to that, and I've probably seen 700 Nutcrackers at this point in my life after being married.
It can be an inspiration to learning. There's no doubt about it. But also there's this wonderful quote that in a way sums up the whole reason I do it. And I actually discovered this around the same time as I was taking that course. It's from Walt Whitman, and he says, "To have great poets, there must be great audiences." Or in my mind, to have great music, there must be great listeners. And so I decided to see what I could do to create a nation of great listeners. And that's really what Makes It Great is all about, creating an audience of great listeners.
That's wonderful. I've found some other quotes that are associated with you about some of these same kinds of things, and even some of the way in which you kind of promote your shows. Certainly, even maybe talking to me, but I've read that you ask a question about why people hate classical music. So you go there immediately.
Well, we definitely have a bad reputation. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's this whole thing. I mean, there are so many comedians who make jokes about elite classical music audiences, as if the only way to like classical music is to enjoy fine wines, no obscure information like Kerschel numbers about Mozart, and it has this kind of reputation as being this elitist art form, which has nothing to do with the music itself. It might have something to do with the culture that's grown up around it, but the music itself has none of that whatsoever. And the title of my first book was called All You Have to Do Is Listen, and that's really the truth. All you have to do is listen. So I'm aware of its bad reputation, and I'm on a one-man mission to change it immediately. It is my deepest belief that everyone in the world loves classical music, only most people have never heard it. And when I say never heard it, I don't mean just had it go by, but I mean heard it the way we hear it when we do a What Makes It Great program. When you really get inside its language, everyone loves it once they actually really hear it.
And let's go there right now, because I think that how we hear, what we hear, this detail that you're going to be getting into, it really is a fascinating subject, especially when you look at, and you and I are going to be talking over the course of the next couple of months as part of this Smithsonian Associates lecture series on your programs. This first one will be on Harold Arlen and his great work, and why, while many of us might not necessarily be familiar with the name Harold Arlen, we certainly are going to know his work once you start talking about it. There are just some great pieces, some hits, actually.
It's interesting. When I started first doing What Makes It Great, I always used purely classical music. We would take apart one piece a night, and it might be a symphony by Beethoven, it might be a sonata by Mozart or something like that. But then about 15 years ago, I was doing this series at Lincoln Center, and they have a wonderful series called American Songbook. And it was they who asked me, would I bring this approach that I do with classical music to American songbook material? And though I had grown up loving all this Broadway music, I'd never really thought about it that way. It was just the music that we all played around the piano and everybody sang. But when I started to look at these American songbook songs as if they were songs by Schubert or Brahms, I was just astonished at how much craft there was and how much we miss even in the songs that we've known by heart all our lives. So that's what this Harold Arlen program is about. It's funny you mentioned that we know his songs. I mean, he basically said 4 words that summed up his entire life was, "You wrote that too?" I mean, people know all those songs, but they had no idea that he wrote Stormy Weather, Get Happy, Over the Rainbow, I've Got the World on a String, That Old Black Magic, Blues in the Night, Come Rain or Come Shine. I mean, people know the music, but they don't know Harold Arlen.
And it's interesting that my audience is going to relate very, very much to this. And even to know that George Harrison, Beatles recorded Arlen's, Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
What do you think inspired Arlen to just this brilliance, this level of kind of almost music perfection, yet making it so accessible that you now in turn are making very accessible to us?
I think there's a wonderful mix in his actual upbringing himself. He was the son of a cantor. It's amazing how many of these American songbook composers were not only Jewish, but sons of cantors and rabbis and things like that. He grew up in Buffalo. Actually, his name was Hyman Arluck. Before he actually became Howard Arlen, which definitely makes for an easier career than Hyman Arluck. Yeah. But, there was this wonderful mixture of growing up, listening to his father singing in the synagogue choir, hearing these cantorial types of songs, and then he became obsessed in his teen years with jazz. And there's this wonderful mix between the kind of improvisatory feel of jazz, the improvisatory feel of those rabbinical songs that he heard as a child, that makes an extremely unique combination.
Yeah, and songs like Over the Rainbow are just timeless and indelible.
I mean, that is the most timeless one. And, it's one of my favorite songs to take apart because everyone knows it by heart. And yet, in my opinion, almost no one has ever really heard it or really realized. Sometimes the people we know the best and the songs we know the best are the people and the songs that we actually hear the least.
That's wonderful, too. So take us through that song.
Now, let's do that.
Yeah,
let's do a little bit there. Let's get started. All right.
Yeah. So jump in and tell us why, oh, why can't I? And dreams really do come true. And this is all just so symbolic and important, but yet just such a beautiful melody that really was kind of an interesting combination between Arlen and Yip Harburg. And they came to a point in creating some of this music for Wizard of Oz where they really had to kind of pause and kind of rethink what they were doing on this particular tune for Judy Garland.
Absolutely. And it's an amazing song. Now, amazingly enough, there are only 2 melodic ideas in the whole opening, this famous opening. The first one I'm going to call Leap, and the second one I'm going to call, you'll see why in a moment, Circle and Yearn.
Okay.
So the very first 2 notes already, this opening leap on Somewhere. By the way, Yip Harburg tried Someday. He tried I'll Go. It actually took him a while to get to the word somewhere. But this opening leap is actually an enormous leap for a popular song, a full octave. But it's not only an enormous leap musically, it's a leap between 2 different parts of your voice. The first note is a kind of low note. It's almost in chest voice. It's Dorothy's troubled reality. It's Kansas. It's aridity. It's the world of no flowers, the black and white of the film's opening. The second note is higher. It's sort of lighter. Ethereal. It's Over the Rainbow. It's Oz, where she actually wants to escape to. So those 2 notes, Kansas and Oz, are actually the key to the entire song, but you won't get their full meaning until you get to the very last note. So we've got 3 leaps in the opening. You've got a big one on Somewhere.
Right.
You've got a smaller one on Way Up. And you've got a third leap lower and still smaller on There's A. The leaps are contracting just like her dreams are. Now, that's idea 1, leap. The second one is what I call Circle and Yearn, because it starts on a note, circles back to it, and then it yearns. Oh, so we've got circle, and then we yearn. That's it. It's interesting. Harburg called this song a song of yearning. And so much of what makes it great is what we don't notice underneath Judy Garland, which is the brilliant harmony. He could easily have taken words way up high and harmonized it cheerfully with chords like this, way up. But instead, listen to the yearning of the piano part underneath. Here. So beautiful underneath like that. There's A could have been that, but there's one dark chord here at the end, minor. There's already trouble in Kansas. And he finishes with 2 circle and yearns. Circle, yearn, circle, yearn, and resolve. Now that's the opening, and that happens twice. Notice that we start on Kansas, we go up to Oz, and then we work our way down step by step and finish why here. The second verse does the same thing. We're yearning for Oz, but we're stuck in Kansas. At the end, there's a beautiful moment where after the song should have finished the third time, and we come back to this one more time, the song should have ended, but instead, he has the orchestra play the music of the B section, and we literally feel her thinking out loud. There's a wonderful quote from Yip Harburg. He says, "Words make you think thoughts, music makes you feel a feeling, but a song makes you feel a thought."
Huh.
And you literally hear her thinking, why can't I get there? If bluebirds can, Then she comes in and sings the music of the B section, If Happy Little Bluebirds Fly. If it had copied the middle, it would have continued. But instead he alters it. And then there's one last rise. Now remember, Kansas Oz. One last rise. And where do we finish? On Oz, the note we've been yearning for since the very first note. And she's gone from C to C, from Kansas to Oz, from reality to fantasy, and her transformation is complete.
Wonderful. That is just fantastic. And that is just the kind of thing we are going to learn from Rob Kapilow at the Smithsonian Associates event, October 30th, 2016 at 6 p.m. It's going to be at Smithsonian Baird Auditorium. Rob, that was fantastic to hear that, because that music is so memorable, but taking us through it like that gives us a sense as to the power and probably why it was the huge hit that it really was.
Yeah, it's the craft that's actually there happening that you don't notice, but it is what makes it actually great. One thing I just want to add so that people understand is that at that program, the good news is I won't be doing any of the singing. We actually have two fantastic Broadway singers doing, and we're only going to look at 5 songs the whole night, but we are going to look at them that closely. And the two singers are, one, Michael Winther, who's actually currently on the tour of Fun Home around the country, and Nikki Renee Daniels, who's currently on Broadway in the Book of Mormon. So the good news is I'll play the piano and talk, but I won't do any of the singing. They will. So we'll take each song apart, and then we'll sing a complete performance that hopefully you'll get to hear with a whole new pair of ears.
Well, how wonderful. And Rob, I hope that you're going to also talk a little bit about your Citypieces program. I just have been so impressed with that. Those of us that have lived in the D.C. area for many, many years will remember the monuments to the Millennium.
Right.
You've done Kansas City. You've done San Francisco's 75th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge. And then what really, I think, caught my attention and caught my eye was the work that you did on the it's titled Summer, Sun, Winter, Moon. Yeah, just beautiful. What drew you to that collaboration, and what did you learn, and what are you hoping to teach from that? And
that was an amazing, the Summer, Sun, Winter, Moon was an amazing project. I originally received a commission to simply write a symphony for the Bicentennial of Lewis and Clark. And like many people, I immediately started, and read Undaunted Courage by Stephen Ambrose, and read this wonderful story of these two great heroes, Lewis and Clark, discovering the West. And I initially thought that what I was going to do was set some of those famous diaries to music. But I started reading all of these diaries, and though they're wonderful historical documents, I ended up really not liking Lewis and Clark. And I have to say, though they're fantastic historical documents, it is not that thrilling to say, we set out from Camp du Bois, there were mosquitoes. It just, it really wasn't the kind of music you wanted to do. And so I got really stuck because I had this commission and I didn't know what to do. So I went to St. Louis to meet the head of the entire Lewis and Clark Bicentennial. And I asked him, what did you do? Like, how did you get started? And he said, it was fascinating. When we started, it was called the Lewis and Clark Bicentennial Celebrations. So I invited representatives of 75 of the Indian tribes that Lewis and Clark visited to become a circle of tribal advisors. And they told me that if you use the word celebrations, no Native Americans want to participate because there's nothing to celebrate. This was the beginning of the end. This was the beginning of genocide. And he said, I have no idea if you'd like to meet them, or maybe they could offer you a perspective on your project. And something really hit. I just thought, wow. So I went up to Great Falls, Montana, for the next meeting of the Circle of Tribal Advisors. And I walked in and I said, hi, I'm writing a symphony about Lewis and Clark, and I'd love to include some of your points of view, very cheery. And they said, get out of the room. Leave immediately. You're just like Lewis and Clark, another white person who wants to take our stories and use them for your own benefit. And, I was really just struck because they were absolutely right. So I went back to my room. I was sick, but I went back the next day and I said, I'm really sorry. I promise I will use none of the material, but I'm here. Can I just listen for the weekend to your points of view? Make a long story short, although it's already a pretty long story. I got to know them. They invited me to go out to one of their reservations. They said, if you really want to understand Native America today, you'll do that. Over the year, I kept traveling out to the Blackfoot Reservation, and I finally got to know a wonderful collaborator of mine, And we invited them to actually, Daryl Kipp was his name, and we invited him to actually write the libretto. And the basic idea was to tell the story of Lewis and Clark, so to speak, not from the boat, but from the banks of the river. To tell it from the Native American perspective. What was it like when these people came as the beginning of the end? And to completely flip the perspective. And so it became an actual educational project, as well as we went to inner city schools in St. Louis and around the country talking about how American history would look different if it were told by Native Americans and blacks. And so it became a huge opportunity to give voice to people who otherwise would not have that voice heard.
Yeah, again, I was just so struck by this because I think that it is this combination of these voices that probably do need to be heard today more than ever. And I think that it's this conversation that probably just needs to be started. And I thought, as I was looking at through some of the material in my research of you, that here's this man, you, trying to really save and preserve classical music and educate all of us. And then here's this member of the Blackfeet tribe, Daryl Kipp, who's trying to keep his language from extinction. And I just thought
I realize how similar they were, but trying to save,
languages, as you put it, that are almost extinct. I'm actually doing a new one next year for the Sesquicentennial in Canada on Confederation, on the meaning of Confederation. So that's another one. But these city pieces for me are a kind of using a piece of music as a catalyst for a conversation about something that otherwise would not be a conversation. And they, again, open up classical music to everyone because I create the piece out of these conversations, and people who would not think that they had the slightest interest in classical music become part of the actual conversation that creates the piece.
Yeah, and the other thing that, of course, is so well known about you, and that is your family music series, the material that you've done with Dr. Seuss, the Polar Express. So when you're at the Smithsonian Baird Auditorium on the 30th of October, I just assume that this is going to be entire families that are going to be present, children, and that many of my audience, grandparents and parents alike, they're going to be wondering, at what age should we begin taking kids to some of these concerts and exposing them to some of this great classical music in order to learn and keep it in our culture?
Well, it's interesting. The whole reason I created Family Music and started writing pieces for kids was actually when I first, at the beginning, these programs were all for adults. And nothing I did was really for young children. And then I had kids, and I would bring them to these concerts, and I would just feel that they were just a terrible way to introduce kids to classical music. And I just vowed, whenever I see something I don't like, rather than complain about it, I try to do something about it myself. And so literally the first piece I ever wrote for kids was Green Eggs and Ham. But it was really because it was a book we read, and I realized millions of people might come to a concert with Green Eggs and Ham who otherwise wouldn't. But I also realized that if you look closely, Green Eggs and Ham is really a parable about prejudice. It's really about a child teaching an adult about prejudice to try something that they're sure that they wouldn't like. And so I realized not only could I use this book as a way of bringing families to music, but also we could have a conversation about prejudice, which is what I do. So the whole idea of Family Music was to try to create an event that would be appropriate for kids, fun for kids, and introduce them to it in a way that would be appropriate. So what I've tried to do is find as many different ways of bringing different audiences. So the Baird Auditorium one tends to be more teenagers, parents, and an adult kind of program. For example, next week I'm out in Stamford, and I'm doing a family music program, which we call Green Eggs and Hamadeus, which pairs my Green Eggs and Ham with a Mozart piece. But that is specifically designed for young children. So what I've tried to do is create different kinds of events, different kinds of books. The Citypieces are one way, just trying to find a way that I could bring what it is that we do to every kind of person in a way that would be appropriate for them. So sometimes it's through a city piece, sometimes through it's writing kids pieces, sometimes it's writing adult pieces. Everyone is a different way for a different audience.
Yeah, and speaking of books, I really was just very impressed with all the technology and the use of the tablet devices, and in particular, the enhanced ebook that you've got, what makes it great, and the enhanced edition. And really, you are walking us through music here, too, but in just kind of another medium that just is one more step in making sure that this message is being communicated, it's out there, and we can access it.
Well, for hundreds of years, you had only two choices in writing a book about music, and both of them were bad. Either you could put musical notation into the book to talk about music in detail, but then 95% of the world who can't read music notation couldn't read your book, or else you would not put any notation in, and then it would be like trying to write a book about art with no pictures. Once the iPad was invented, I suddenly realized that there was a new opportunity, which is that in that book, all of the musical examples, there are 200 musical examples in notation, actually you simply touch them, they explode to full screen, and not only can you hear them, but there's a scroll bar that scrolls over the music in real time as it plays, and the comments about the music are written on the music, so you can literally hear what's happening and know exactly what moment I'm talking about just by watching the scroll bar. And so suddenly, after hundreds of years, for the very first time, the kind of detailed conversation about music that I could do in a live concert is now possible in book form, because you don't have to read a note of music and you can understand every example. So every book, I'm actually writing a new book right now, and it will have the same technology. But that literally was made possible by the iPad and the new kinds of tablets.
Well, kudos to you for making use of that technology too, because I think that really shows the commitment. And again, we're here with Rob Kapilow. Rob is a composer, a conductor, a lecturer, a music expert, and I think one of the most exciting speakers that you will see, and he's going to be appearing at the Smithsonian Baird Auditorium October 30th, 2016 at 6 p.m. So much energy and passion, commitment, just a great opportunity to see and learn. And I think it's when I say learn, it's just some really wonderful things to know about and to kind of understand and appreciate. And so just one last question for you, Rob, and that is, in addition to some of the work that we'll hear from, of course, Harold Arlen, will we, even be, getting to hear a little bit of Paper Moon and That Old Black Magic and Stormy Weather and those songs?
Yes, you will. You'll be hearing Stormy Weather. You'll be hearing That Old Black Magic. You'll be hearing, well, there's also some encores there that I don't want to give away. But yes, you'll be hearing Get Happy, Accentuate the Positive. Oh, yes, you'll be hearing at least, we'll look very closely at 5 songs, and then it's just possible there might be some encores there as well.
That's great. Well, we will put links up to all the places where we can find you, Rob, including the ebook and all of your other work. But what a thrill. Again, October 30th at the Baird Auditorium. We're looking forward to it. I will be there. Rob, I'm looking forward to seeing you, and I'm going to be bringing my family. But thanks for your time just now. Anything I left out or anything you want to add?
All I have to say is, to have great music, there must be great audiences, and I want to thank you for this opportunity for helping to create yet another great audience.
Well, thanks so much, Rob. I appreciate it, and thanks for joining us and being flexible. And I think we're gonna really have a great segment, and this music that you've done is just gonna be wonderful to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to all my guests today, all the help on the podcast, and especially to Media Studio Edit and the great work by Wayne Brown and his team for editing the podcast and making me sound so much better. That is to say, not old, but better. Thanks to all.